Hello, everyone. Welcome. Appreciate you joining us today. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes to let people kind of filter in before we get started. Thanks. Okay, I think we've actually we stabilized out of it on the participants, so I think we'll get going. So welcome everyone. Really appreciate you coming out today to join us for this presentation on these corridor redevelopment tools. I myself, I am Dan Bursick. I am the Planning Administrator for Planning and Development Services. We have a handful of staff that are here as well. We have Corin Manning, who's the Deputy Director for Planning and Development Services. We have Carver Struve, who's been working on this. He is a Principal Planner in Code Development. And then additionally, we have Lissa Hall, who is here, who is a consultant that's been helping us on this project, and she's going to present a portion of the presentation that we have here as well. So with that, I think we'll get going. What we have on the agenda for today is starting off, we have a development pattern preference survey. This is something that we developed kind of just to kind of get an understanding of kind of visual preferences and think a little bit about kind of what we have in our built environment and kind of just get us thinking about our corridors and the development that's out there. From there, we'll talk a bit about these kind of corridor redevelopment tools, which we are looking at to encourage redevelopment along our corridors of diverse housing options and address housing affordability. We'll go through a background and overview of that. We'll talk a bit about what is driving kind of some of our, the significant increase in housing costs that we have out there. We've looked at other cities, so we'll talk a bit about what other cities have done. Talk about why we're looking at corridors and definitely for this project. Then we'll talk about how to encourage more housing and then some zoning tools related to that we are proposing. From that, we do have a little kind of Mentimeter exercise to help us to prioritize, or at least get your priorities related to the vision, concerns, goals, and strategies. And then some time for question and answer at the end. Just so you know, this is a lot of information. So if you have clarifying questions, please let us know. But questions related to content and comments, please leave those for the end. We do have time set aside for that, but there's a lot to get through. Just some meeting agreements. When making comments or questions, be concise. We want to allow everyone to speak before speaking again. We have a lot of diverse kind of opinions and backgrounds, so be respectful of others and different viewpoints. Stay on topic, and then, as I mentioned, save questions till the end of the presentation. And did want to let you know, I know there's a notice as you come in, but this meeting is being recorded. The plan is to take this and post it online, so we can go back and reference it. Anybody can come back and kind of watch through it. So for the visual preference survey, so we have 5 different visual preferences here. And what it is and what we're looking for is really just getting an understanding of kind of the different trade-offs that we have currently. A lot of times, different types of single family, different types of multifamily, et cetera. So this first one, and we're going to choose A or B. It's pretty simple. On the left-hand side, you have small scale development. And on the or on both sides, you have small scale development. You have single family, primarily single family detached, some attached. And then on our right-hand side, similar single family homes, but in more of a kind of attached version or a townhome version. So what I'm going to do is I have a little poll. I'm just going to pop out the poll for this one and launch it for you. give you a couple, 15, 20 seconds or so to answer. Right, looks like the majority of people have responded. Looks like about 29, 30% for A and about 70% for B. And I'll share those results. People can take a look. Number 2, and we'll hopefully get to theirs, is medium scale apartments. So again, auto, and this one's looking at on the left, auto-oriented design versus transit-oriented design. So I will share this one now. Again, A versus B. That one looked like about 35% A and about 65% B. All right. And go to number 3. So this one is single-use commercial versus mixed-use commercial and residential. So on the left-hand side, you have the single use for A versus the multi-use on the second side, or mixed use. I'll launch that one right now. Looks, yeah, 13% and 87%. Share those results. Definitely preference towards mixed use in that one. All right, and the next one. This is just kind of looking generally at housing development and auto-oriented design versus transit-oriented design. So left-hand side versus right-hand side. We'll start sharing that one right now. I will say this is, it seems to be working pretty well. It's a little more fun to do this exercise with dots and being able to place them when you're in person. But it's, but seems to be working okay. Okay, like 16 versus 84%. Share those results. All right. And then we have one more for you. And this one has underutilized sites on the left versus, and that's kind of what we're looking at here, versus looking at infill housing and infill development. Yes, Marianne, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say on some of these, I'm like, I want to do both. So just,
Yeah.
it's like for underutilized sites and infill housing, I feel like they're both just as important as the other. So I'm just bringing that up.
No, that's a very good point. We appreciate it. And really what this is getting us to kind of just think about what opportunities there are, both within sites that could be redeveloped and
Mhm.
sites that have been, or that type of thing. So thank you. Great. Okay, and then for that one, we're at about 15 versus 85%. And that poll and share those results. So yeah, thank you so much for that and the feedback related to that. It just, again, just kind of getting us thinking about, what we can do and what is out there. So I can figure out how to move to the next slide. Okay, so just related to this, so this project and what we're bringing in front of you today is mayor and council direction that has come to us from 4 study sessions. So, and study sessions that have occurred really over the last year plus. So going back to February 22nd of 2023, there was a study session with mayor and council on recommendations from the Commission on Equitable Housing. This was recommendations that commission had brought to us on ways to incentivize, and especially through regulatory methods and through zoning codes, affordable housing in our code. So it was looking at things, there were recommendations related to, potentially increased building heights, parking reductions, et cetera, for housing specifically. We had a second study session, which was with mayor and council on the redevelopment of underutilized sites. A large portion of this is related to that. That was looking at, again, those vacant sites, those underutilized sites, and especially there was a big emphasis on how do we, reuse and make more efficient use of areas that are currently filled with parking, and looking at parking kind of redevelopment. There was a third one on August 8th, 2023. That was a study session on building and zoning code regulations for tiny homes. So there's an aspect of this looking at really housing, different housing types and how do you provide different housing types, but also looking at what those barriers might be for tiny homes. And then October 17th, 2023, we kind of brought all that together. We had this phase 1 kind of research that we brought to mayor and council for a study session and provided them a work plan on really how to develop, address all of these areas. And they reviewed our work plan and told us to move forward with some opportunity site analysis that has really led to this proposal. So the goals here for this project are really fairly simple. It's to make it easier to develop infill housing, remove barriers, incentivize transit-oriented development, pedestrian-oriented development, and allow a full spectrum of housing types. Really, and then, finally, just kind of making it easier to adaptively reuse existing buildings and vacant sites. It's kind of looking at a lot of these different things and looking at those opportunities that we currently may have along our corridors and along our commercial kind of corridors. One thing that we do want to really make sure is clear, and this is something that as we've kind of had some conversations, both with committees and also internally, we want to make sure it's really clear that this is a citywide tool. Our reason for pointing this out is because up until now, the way we have addressed corridors is really geographically specific, like our infill incentive district or urban overlay districts. It was kind of based off of our analysis that we did in the first phase that led us to kind of start to look at these kind of corridor tools and citywide tools for that. One thing we also want to mention is that, there are, certain strategies and things of that sort that we can do just to kind of minimize or try to help with potential displacement. One of which is really treating areas similarly. So using citywide tools versus very geographically specific tools, which would intensify development of one specific area and lead to potential displacement. So in addition to those 4 mayor and council study sessions, we have held, we have a lot of direct policy and policy direction that comes from our plans that we have adopted over the last 20+ years. And even a lot more from recent years. So we have a lot more recent plans as well that really support this. What this is an opportunity to align our zoning codes with our adopted plans and policies for this. As an example, plans like Plan Tucson, even our street design guide for Tucson, Move Tucson, Tucson Resilient Together, housing affordability strategy for Tucson, all of those have goals and policies that support, support both infill development, but some of the things that could potentially come from infill development. So more pedestrian-friendly development, increased housing supply, try to address affordability, and items such as that. There are also additional plans beyond these. There's the Prosperity Initiative, there's the Age-Friendly Action Plan from AARP, as well as several of our neighborhood plans, Complete Streets Policy, and some of our zoning tools that also support this. I think the idea here is just to say that these are things that have been a part of that have been policies in place for a long time and for a while and have been pretty consistent. And a lot of public input has gone into those as well. So I do want to mention that, we have done a pretty thorough review as well of a lot of the public input that came about through these plans. So to try to work on crafting a tool that is reflective of the community. Just as an example, a kind of Plan Tucson general plan policies, there's lots of different policies. There's even a goal that talks about interconnected multimodal transportation system that enhances the mobility of people and goods. There's also a lot of land use transportation and urban design policies that really go through and support a tool such as this. So just as an example, LT3, support development opportunities where you're really bringing everything together. There's close proximity to transit, there's multimodal transportation choices, there's potential to develop moderate, higher density development. All of these really support what we're looking at here. Again, Move Tucson's another example, just as far as just kind of helping to support that transportation system, that transit system, and multimodal transportation, as well as the street design guidelines, guide and vision statement. Additionally, there are strategies and policies in Tucson Resilient Together, which is our climate action plan, that look at promoting walking, biking, and rolling, as sustainable and climate resilient mobility options, and smart growth. Our housing affordability strategy for Tucson as well really looks at ways that we can address the affordability issues that we have, and one of which is updating zoning regulations to encourage affordable housing and encourages housing choice in the city. So one of the main reasons we're looking at a lot of this is really just related to housing and housing affordability, to show why it's necessary for us to make changes to support the creation of new housing and housing types. We really want to go over the rising costs in the current situation of where we're at. This in front of you is the median single family and condo home sales price from 2012 to 2024. And in that time period, there's been more than 180% increase in purchase price of a home over the last 12 years. So it's gone from, I think it's right around $175,000 to up to $451,000 in order to purchase a single family home. So astronomical increase for those in the city of Tucson. And again, these are things that are moving and increasing more than the wages that are increasing in Tucson. Additionally, renting has also had a significant increase. Over the last 9 years, 98% increase for the rental, the price to rent and the median rent per unit in the city of Tucson. So going from right over $750,000 all the way up to over $15,000 a month, or $1,500 a month. I apologize for that. This is again a rapid increase, and what ends up happening is you have housing costs that go up and up and up, and it pushes people to have to rent, and then those rental prices continue to go up as well. So really what this is that just affordable housing is an issue that really is impacting all of us. This significant increase in rents and housing prices is displacing many of our families and friends out of our neighborhoods. It is putting a financial burden on us as Tucsonans, and requiring many of us to potentially pick up another job, find more hours, but also even just not being able to find housing. We've seen a significant increase population of unhoused individuals in the city of Tucson related to this. And it's a continuing problem that we have. So talk a little bit about, a little more about what that means as far as affordability. So this, what we have here in front of you shows, oh, no, right, okay. Shows the rental market affordability in the city of Tucson. And this is information from the National Housing Conference, and it's based on median household prices and wages, and based on purchasing and renting a home in the last 6 months. So it shows how much you could afford with a certain salary, going from studio apartment to 4-bedroom apartment. And with this, it just kind of shows that for many people, firefighters, nurses, teachers, homeowner, its rental market is challenging, especially if you need a 2-bedroom unit for a family or something of that sort or more. As we see on the right-hand side, we have wages. We have median wages for some common kind of professions. So elementary school teachers, graphic designers, firefighters, hairstylists, and then cashiers. An even more a kind of a challenging situation is the cost of home ownership. So this is related to home ownership affordability, and really what you need in order to be able to purchase a home with a 10% down payment. Your annual income needs to be either $115,000 a year, or with a 3% down payment, $123,000, which is so much more than the wages of a lot of these common professions within the city of Tucson. I mean, currently the median income in the city of Tucson is $51,281. When you add in things, especially for people that have degrees, for the cost of student loans, childcare, those can be $500 plus a month for each of those, as well as the cost to operate a vehicle. It puts a significant financial strain on many of our residents, and making them vulnerable to the loss of housing. As an example, and these are people that are definitely part of our community and things of that sort. There's some examples of professions that could potentially afford, what those prices are and those median prices. So on the left, again, you have the $115,000 plus and $123,000 plus, but it's professions like CEOs, lawyers, dentists, veterinarians, physicians, who are the ones who really can afford in our market, and what we have here. And even some of them barely do. Like a lawyer with a median wage of $124,990 is barely above, the $123,000 required for an annual for a 3% down payment. So what's been happening really is that Tucson and the surrounding communities are growing. This growth is from families and kids and people moving into the city, as well as kind of natural growth within the city of us as Tucsonans. What's interesting is that the largest segment of our population that's growing are people that are aged 20 to 44 right now. The second largest is people under the age of 20. And those are people that as they get older, as they age, do need housing, and those are ones that may not have the means to be able to afford the housing as we move forward. From 2013 to 2022, 9 years or so, we've had about 3.5% growth, but it's been 35,000 people. What we've seen, however, in that last 9 years is that our building and our supply just hasn't kept pace with our population. So housing has dropped, housing development dropped off in 2008, and it really didn't recover. If you look at this graph here, it kind of shows, so the 1-unit structures of the blue, and then kind of the brown are the 5-unit structures. I think those are a lot of the kind of garden apartments, the 2- and 3-story ones that you see. Both were being produced at a pretty good rate. Definitely in the 90s for multifamily. Multifamily started to kind of taper off, but single family housings really developed a lot. But then when the recession hit back in 2007, we really don't see it coming back and us being able to and being able to keep up with the growth that has occurred really in the last 9 years. And what it's doing is it's really creating a limited supply, and it's pushing a lot of those prices higher than they have been in the past. This is just kind of an example of where we're seeing it built. So, so this right on the left-hand side is 1 to 4 units. Most of those are 1 units, but it's really happening down along I-10 to the south, and then all the way on the east side to in the periphery. We have a little bit happening on the west side as well, but that's where that's where you're seeing most of the new development, and it's happening with single-family housing. Very little mid-sized multifamily has occurred in the last 10 years, and then you'll see really only a handful of larger multifamily projects that are all clustered in downtown. So basically what this has caused is that when you have, let's say 6 people that need houses, but you have a limited supply and you only have 3 houses necessarily for them, it really what ends up happening is that those with the most resources will end up getting that housing. Even if, even if it's a cheaper unit or something of that sort, they end up going into that housing and pushing people to something that either they won't be available or something that they won't be able to afford, essentially. And what happens is this is playing out in our city over and over again and driving up housing costs and pushing people to move further and further out to find that affordable housing. So, historically, what we've done is that we've grown out, and there was this kind of whole term, drive till you qualify, for housing markets for decades. Well, what's happened is that if you look at 1965, most of the development in Tucson really is clustered in the center area. There's, there's the Rito and kind of there. But as we've grown, over the last, 40 years or actually 60 years, we're really starting to reach the limits of what we can do. We're building all the way out in Vail now. We're building up in Oro Valley, all the way through Marana, as well as continuing to the south. And this has created an unsustainable land use pattern. Essentially, it creates problems related to the environment. So urban heat island effect, habitat destruction, reliance on cars, as well as CO2 emissions. It has created economic problems. That pattern of development doesn't pay for itself. It doesn't have enough of a tax base to support the infrastructure that gets built and needs to be maintained. And then it also leads to long commute times and lack of access to job opportunities in some of those areas. So this is what we've done historically, but what if we were to develop within our city in a way to provide more housing for people so they didn't necessarily have to live on the periphery and had more housing options. So this is that same situation that we had before with maybe 3 houses that were available for those 6 people versus a situation to where now you have 6 people, or now you have these same people, but you have 5 houses that are available. So more of these people will have 6 houses. Sorry, 6 houses. It's a duplex right there. It's 5 images, 6 houses. But more options for people, as well as more houses for people, so you don't end up in that situation to where the people can't. It hopefully helps to address some of those supply issues related to that. So at that, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to pass this over to Alyssa, and she's going to go over kind of some things we've learned from our research and from our other communities in the country.
All right, well, good afternoon. So part of this project, we've done a significant amount of research to understand what is driving the housing cost, as well as understand possible solutions. And a big part of this research that we've done is done case studies. And so cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles demonstrate that we can slow and limit housing development, but we can't stop population growth. And that doesn't stop population growth. And if we don't plan for and allow additional housing units to be built, housing prices will go up significantly. And that same story is playing out here in the Tucson area. Now, granted, it isn't as extreme as Los Angeles and San Francisco, but Tucson has seen a 68% increase in housing prices. So from 2017 to 2023, it's gone up that 68%. And then if we add in an additional 3 years, we've actually seen that double. And so what that really does is it puts a lot of pressure on our low income neighborhoods to to start to gentrify, and this causes issues like displacement and even increases in our homeless population. But this isn't a story that is playing out over the entire country. There are cities that are planning for growth and allowing more housing units to be developed. And what they're seeing is actually a containment of those housing prices, and really over time, even building more affordable housing units, they actually have seen an increase in the number of, or even building more luxury units, so more units in general, actually over through this process called filtering, enables more affordable housing into the community. Next slide, Dan. So let's dig into this a little bit further. And so Minneapolis is a great example. They're a city that actually has grown more significantly over this last decade than Tucson has. And yet they have seen only a 1% increase in housing prices, while Tucson has seen a 38% increase, or a 68% increase in those housing prices. And a big part of this is Minneapolis has been working on reforming their land use, and so allowing more intense development, especially along their transit corridors. And so their private market has responded to these zoning reforms by building more mid-rise housing. And so really what that is it goes about 4 to about 6, sometimes 8 stories, depending on the location. And so as these units have been built and have been becoming available, it enables the city to basically be able to contain those housing prices. So again, Minneapolis has seen a 1% increase during this period of time, while growing faster than Tucson has, and yet Tucson has seen a 68% increase. And it's also interesting to point out that they've seen a decrease in their homelessness population. So they've seen a 12% decrease, while Tucson has seen actually a 38% increase. And so looking at cities like Phoenix and Austin, it also demonstrates, and they've been doing similar things with their zoning, is updating it to allow more of this mid-rise or higher in density housing that along commercial corridors. And so what they've seen is a containment on their housing increases, and actually Tucson has increased more in percentage than Phoenix has. And part of that is Phoenix is building more multifamily housing that is helping to contain those prices. And they're actually starting to see, as a substantial number of units are coming online, they're actually starting to see a decrease in their prices. And so really, what the research is telling us is it not only helps to contain those prices, but it also helps to reduce the pressure of gentrification and displacement in adjacent lower income neighborhoods. Next slide, Dan. So why corridors? Well, corridors are where the primary land use is commercial. And that's really where this project is focused. It's not really focused on residential zoning, but it's really focused more on the commercial zoning. And that's where primarily this type of zoning is located. And there's a significant number of what I like to call opportunity sites. So these underutilized sites, these vacant lots, these underperforming strip malls, these large malls with these gigantic fields of parking around them. These provide great opportunities to be able to redevelop and provide the housing, and potentially even start to shift the predominant land use pattern from car oriented to more transit, walkable, and biking oriented. Next slide, Dan. So what is a corridor? So for this project, we're really defining it as an arterial or a collector street. And these, again, are the major kind of streets that connect Tucson east to west and north to south. And they're really where the primary transit infrastructure is. And they're also on the edges of neighborhoods. So it's really trying to focus that development on those edges. And that's really where city policy for many years has directed this more intense growth to go. And again, this is where most of the commercial and office zoning is located. Next slide. And so mayor and council see this opportunity to take these underutilized sites, these deserted big boxes, these underperforming strip malls, these fields of parking lots, these vacant lots, and turn them into the housing Tucson needs and wants. And it's also important to note that these sites aren't contributing a lot to the city. They're not creating a lot of tax revenue in the form of property or in sales taxes. And it's also important to note that these are heat sinks. These large parking lots and even vacant lots create so much heat that gets radiated out into Tucson at night and just continues to make it a hotter and less comfortable place to be in. Next slide. So it's important to point out that zoning is our city's DNA. It's basically how it basically determines where and how a city develops. And it's such an important piece that really drives how the private market ends up developing the city. And currently right now, the DNA for Tucson is a car-oriented, low-density, single-use type of development that really favors the car over any other form of transportation, to the point where it makes it very difficult to choose to bike, walk, or use transit. Next slide. And so this project really provides an opportunity to start to shift that zoning, or really update that zoning to enable and to allow pedestrian-oriented development, and really start to create the Tucson that has been envisioned through all of these policy documents. And it's an opportunity to start to stitch our neighborhoods together with our transit corridors, our jobs, and our retail amenities, as well as other key destinations. Next slide. And really, this pedestrian-oriented development is what I like to call a solution multiplier. By investing in it, it provides a remarkable number of benefits. You can live a more active lifestyle, which helps with health outcomes. And it also provides all these environmental benefits. I mean, cars are so destructive for the environment. They belch out an incredible amount of heat as well as carbon dioxide. And all the roads and the parking that is required in order to accommodate it really increases that urban heat island. Plus, trying to solve Tucson's housing problem primarily through single-family development would take an incredible amount of land, requiring us to even further sprawl out over the urban environment, taking away even more farmland and the natural environment, and require larger roads, larger parking lots, and potentially even freeways in order to be able to move people from point A to point B. Next slide. Walkable urbanism, or pedestrian-oriented development, also provides a lot of economic benefits. Low-density, single-family development and big box stores surrounded by large parking lots do not generate enough revenue to be able to provide the necessary resources to cover all of that infrastructure that is needed to support it. And so by thickening up our corridors and by thickening up these key nodes, we can start to generate more resources that can not only help to maintain the existing infrastructure, but to start to provide those resources that are needed to create more walkable streets, to invest in parks and recreation and all those amenities that I think every single one of us would like to see more of. As well as more people mean more customers. Oh, and I forgot on the environmental one too, because I keep seeing this, conversation about water popping up, right? Single family development and water use primarily is on the exterior. That's 70% of it. So as we transition to this more compact form that has less outdoor space, you actually see a decrease in people's water usage. So, as we try to figure out how do we, basically house all these people that are coming into our state and coming into our city, this is a form that is much more efficient than single family housing or low density sprawl type of development patterns. It is also more energy efficient too. Shared walls provide such an incredible amount of reduction in energy consumption as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, Dan. So I think it's important to talk about this. How do we build it, right? I think that's such an important piece to it. And I think it's also important to point out that the vast majority of housing is built by the private sector. And it's really for developers to be able to stay in business and to be able to build housing, there needs to be not only demand, but it needs to be built at a price that people can afford. And that's really the big challenge that I think we're facing here with the current zoning is what is allowed by zoning, what it costs to build that. So a 2-story garden apartment people can't actually afford to live there. So they can't pay the rent or be able to afford the mortgage to live in that type of housing. And so basically it makes it so it's impossible for developers to be able to get loans and the necessary resources in order to build this type of housing. And so a big part of what we've been looking at as part of this process is doing some market analysis. So really kind of understanding like where is that sweet spot that we need with height and kind of intensity in order to be able to allow development to occur. Because again, even in the nonprofit sector that is focused on affordable housing, zoning is a big barrier. There's just such a gap between what it costs to build this housing, what is allowed in the zoning versus what people can actually pay to afford. And so even though there's incentives and there's grants and there's all these things that can do to fill that gap, the gap is so big that it really can't be filled. And so that's where zoning and zoning reforms are really important to being able to help with that. And ultimately, by building more housing units, as Minneapolis has demonstrated so well over this last decade, is then we can start to contain those housing prices and we can get people out of living situations that are really unsafe and unfortunate for a lot of folks. So I think this, this project presents a unique opportunity to start to not only build more housing, but build the type of housing that Tucson really wants. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dan.
Hey, Dan, you're on mute.
Yeah, I still do that. It's been like what, 5 years? Yeah. Anyways, so why does our zoning code need to be updated? So ultimately it comes down to the fact that our zoning code does not align with the vision that we have co-created. So Tucson has changed significantly over the last 50 years. And the vision of our city is very different than it was in the past. Yet our zoning code hasn't really changed significantly. Our current UDC, except for the urban overlay districts, which have been done more recently and are more reflective of kind of current development patterns, really does favor car-centric designs. In the city of Tucson, it's easier to develop self-storage units, drive-throughs, than it is to construct mixed-use buildings that promote transit and help with walking. This code really it supports low-density development that fails to generate sufficient revenue for maintaining and enhancing our infrastructure and our public amenities. So ultimately, while our code, it just continues to promote low-density car-dependent patterns, making it really economically viable developments are illegal. So just to kind of talk a little bit about kind of what we've seen as far as zoning and multifamily development related to our zoning and our zoning code. So this right here, we do have some tools that kind of help with more kind of urban development and the flexibility that's really needed in order to develop some of this. We have our downtown infill incentive district and our urban overlay districts that do allow for some reduced setbacks and reduced parking and increased building height in exchange for better design. We have an individual parking plan, which allows for some additional parking reductions, as long as you can prove that you don't need it. And then we have some additional things that we've done with reduced parking for small scale multifamily. However, most of these are either geographically specific, which is what our current overlays are, or they're a discretionary process or an additional process that's added to something that really reduces the predictability, which is something that you really need to do as you're early on in the design, as well as costs overall. So this on the right-hand side that we have here is showing multifamily development in the city of Tucson over the last 10 years. And you'll see kind of interestingly, and it's also kind of teasing it out. So we have in our infill incentive districts and urban overlay districts versus that it has been developed outside of them. 56% of multifamily has been developed in a very small geographic area, which is within our urban overlay districts. It is less than 10% of the city, yet it's taken on 56% of the development. The other 44% of multifamily has been developed over the last 10 years, has occurred kind of dispersed throughout. However, you see these 3 big dots that are or 5 big dots. 3 of those 5 are within our planned area developments, which are kind of as flexible zoning tools that can be very specific. What this is really telling us is that our zoning code isn't working to provide us the type of development and the multifamily and the supply that we really need in the city of Tucson. So what is getting built? So this is an example of kind of what we're seeing as far as the development that's coming from our zoning code. So we have housing developments, but housing developments that are very auto-oriented. The parking garage fronts right on the street. This building setback, so there's a big parking lot and a wall between that and like the pedestrian areas or sidewalks. There are car washes, they are drive-throughs. These are a lot of the things that are easy to build with our current zoning code. On the other hand, a lot of the stuff that we see as in our visions, in our policy documents that we've been talking about for years, such as infill development, transit-oriented development, things that are pedestrian-friendly, that support our community, are things that really are more challenging to do so, which is one of the reasons why we're really not seeing a lot of these. I think, Lisa mentioned it before, there are lots of factors, but when you start adding in all of those factors, it really makes it very, very challenging to do that. And one of those factors, and one of the primary factors, at least, that we've seen from talking to people, in addition to increased land costs, increased building costs, and cost of money as well, with interest rates going up, are those zoning barriers that we have. Even if the market allowed for you to build a 4-story mixed-use building that's pedestrian-friendly, even if the market allowed for you to do that, the zoning code doesn't allow for you to do that in a lot of places. Based on our opportunity site analysis, we did that initial market analysis last year that was conducted. We have experience from our urban overlays as well that has helped us with kind of identifying different barriers, as well as there was an AARP zoning code audit that they had done that they submitted to us. We have identified the following as really the biggest barriers to redevelopment of underutilized parcels. First one are the parking requirements. So parking requirements, we have specific numbers for each parking parcel, We have specific numbers for each unit. And a lot of those, what it does is eats up a lot of space and makes it very challenging to fit much of anything else on that lot. What it also does, it leads to urban heat island effect, as Lissa was talking about. It leads to increased stormwater runoff when you have all of that impervious surface. It's one of those things that both mayor and council has identified for us to take a look at with this, but also one of those things that really does, it inhibits the type of development we want, but it also has a much worse overall outcome after it is put in. Height maximums. So this is one that we're seeing to where you need a certain development height in order to make something work. Additionally, our zoning code really hasn't kept up with modern building practices. So while a single floor may have been 9 or 10 feet in the past, now you need, because of the way things are being developed, you need additional height. So it may not be a lot, it may be an additional 5 feet, but those 5 feet that are there in some circumstances, it could be 10 or 12, but are causing it a very challenging situation, or a situation to where nothing can be developed that meets the market demand. Density and lot coverage regulations, building setbacks. We have variable setbacks. Those are very challenging. Split zoning. So this is a situation to where, and we have this in Tucson in a lot of places, there are commercial zonings along our corridors, and then there's a strip of residential zoning in the back. Even if it's on a vacant lot, it's either R1 or R2 or R3 in some cases. And it forces you not only the fact that you can't put anything on there related to that commercial activity, but you also have to set back from that zone. Even if it's 100 feet away from any other development, you still have to set back from that zone, causing a lot of challenges to be able to redevelop our vacant sites especially. And then overall discretionary processes. We have a range of different discretionary processes in the city of Tucson, from rezonings, which can add a lot of cost and a lot of variability, as well as even some of our overlays do have a discretionary processes. We know that these increase time, they decrease predictability, they increase cost. That cost gets passed on to the actual person who utilizes that, and it gets added to the rent in the end. So those make it really challenging. So these are the barriers that we've really identified through our analysis for that. Related to that, and based on that analysis, as well as that experience that we've had with our overlays, the following are the proposed zoning tools, the things that we're looking at for this tool. I want to mention again, it's a citywide tool that we are looking at. It has location requirements for it. So if you are adjacent to a corridor, you're on a corridor, and you're in a commercial zone, essentially, it would be criteria based. You would be basically be able to utilize this option, essentially. And what it does for you is really kind of an exchange, but it would be one that encourages mixed use and mid-rise housing and uses that are supportive of that corridor and support transit-oriented development, pedestrian-oriented development. One thing that we would look at doing with this, and we're looking to propose on this, is limiting the types of uses that you can use it for. Again, you're not going to, you can't come in and use it to put in a drive-through or put in a single-use kind of car wash or something of that sort. Remove reduced parking minimums. Again, this is one of those things that really makes redevelopment and development challenging, especially redevelopment. We've seen a lot of communities in the country and elsewhere look at both reducing and removing parking minimums. A lot of development's still going to put in parking. They're going to put in the parking they need for it. Whenever we're dictating how much parking goes in there, unless it just happens to be exactly the amount they want, we're always going to be dictating more than what's needed, leading to more urban heat island effect, leading to more stormwater runoff that we really don't need. Increased building heights based on zone. We're looking at 1 to 2 additional stories in commercial zones. Currently, we only allow for 30 and 35 feet in our C1 and C2 zones, which has made it really challenging to develop multifamily within there. We're one of a handful of communities in the state of Arizona that currently allows for multifamily in their commercial zones, but we're still not seeing a lot of multifamily in our commercial zones because there's these barriers such as building height. Density requirements. One thing we are looking at here is looking at either increasing our density requirements or potentially getting rid of them. What we've seen is that when you have density requirements, even in addition to form, it can be regulated. The size of the building, impact of the building can be regulated other ways, but if you have density requirements, you end up with larger units overall in order to meet that. So if you require 10 units on the slot, or 15 units, you might get 15 units and get a mix of like a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. Yet with the 10, they might get a bunch of 3s and 4s. So it's forcing larger units that maybe the community and we don't necessarily need. Reduced setbacks. We have these things called variable setbacks in the city of Tucson. and they make it very challenging because they reduce the amount that you can actually do on a lot. The taller you get in building height, the more you have to set it back from the property line. So you end up with a situation kind of similar to some of the examples we showed before. You push that building back and you end up putting a parking lot between the sidewalk and the building. It leads to a less pedestrian-friendly environment. It's really bad urban design. And it also puts all that heat right next to the person who's walking along the street versus a building which can provide shade, which can also, you know, help to kind of deal with some of the kind of uncomfortableness of walking on an arterial. We want to look at shade and open space requirements. Related to this, we think there's an opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, to address kind of to improve the urban heat island effect and how that is with development. For that, and looking at shade and open space requirements, we're proposing a tool to address that split zoning issue, which is all over the city. And then on top of that, we are looking at additional incentives for affordable housing. We've done this in our infill incentive district. And so things like maybe an additional story or two if you provide a certain amount of affordable housing within your project. We don't see a lot of mixed affordable housing and market rate, which we'd like to see. It's just challenging to get financing for and challenging to do. But providing some additional incentives for affordable housing is both, you know, direction we receive from mayor and council, but something that could be very beneficial. And then finally, looking at, you know, maybe potentially some additional incentives for things like ground floor retail, et cetera, for that. And then finally, sorry, I said finally twice, but and then also just looking at adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse is very expensive, and it can be, but we want to continue to revitalize and utilize our existing building stock. So how can we make it easier to invest in existing buildings along our corridors? You're seeing actually a pretty good example of that on Broadway right now, with the Sunshine Mile and the redevelopment of the Solot Plaza and some of those historic buildings that are over there. But those are very challenging, and they needed the Sunshine Mile overlay in order to do so. So in order to really support that type of thing, there are some tools that we're looking at including. So in exchange for this, so the idea here is that, you know, you do allow for additional flexibility and some additional intensity along these corridors, but then there are these kind of basic form standards in order to provide a product that is more supportive of really the community needs, but also transit-oriented and pedestrian-oriented development. So this is an example of kind of some of the basic form standards we would be looking at. Kind of direction of shop fronts, making sure that they're, you know, that they're engaging the sidewalks, having some open space requirements potentially, as well as pedestrian entries, and making sure that those open to that open space. Looking at things such as building orientation and entrances. So orienting entrances away from main facades and away from parking areas. Building entrances should orient also to like the sidewalk so you can actually connect to where you need to go, as well as providing kind of access to those open spaces that are within those areas. So active and shaded ground floors. This is something that's really important, and we think that can both do two things. One, you know, address the urban heat island effect, but also address things such as like actual thermal comfort on the ground. So we've been coordinating with U of A and talking through with them on how this tool can address urban heat island effect. In our conversations, we really do believe this tool and the resulting development from this tool would lead to a better overall situation related to both of those. First of all, just any redevelopment of parking lots, vacant dirt lots, can reduce the overall urban heat island effect. In addition, if you add a cool roof or even just a white roof and some vegetation, you're helping even more so related to this. Add in a little bit of shade and some requirement for that to help with overall thermal comfort. And we really do believe this can be a tool that'll help to address that. What it also does on top of that is by diverting development from the periphery to allow for more options in the city instead of driving everyone out to the edge. You're having less development on the edge, which really does have a big impact on the overall urban heat island effect for the full region. It's all that infrastructure. It's the parking lots. It's the roadways that really lead to a lot of the increase in that urban heat island effect. And then additionally, we're looking as well, kind of related to that, different ways of potential is having some open space. that is also, again, supportive of those areas around the new development. And then finally, kind of transition and scale, and looking at ways to really transition that new development into existing areas. So lower scale development that's closer to the existing neighborhoods and how that works out that way. So looking at some transitions in scale and form, and loading that intensity on the corridor up by the major road and away from the back of the property, that type of thing. So I know that was a lot, but I do want to talk a little bit about next steps. And then I'm going to jump into some kind of, we have a little exercise, and then we'll have some discussion. So this is kind of what we're thinking moving forward. August 24th, looking at community feedback on the goals and strategies. That's kind of what we're doing right now. And we're taking all of that community feedback, and that will go into our analysis and our drafting of a proposal. So we're looking in September of kind of finalizing that analysis and drafting the proposal, and then coming back to the community in September to share those proposed changes and get feedback. Based on that feedback, we would make revisions, make changes, and then we're looking at in October bringing us to our planning commission for a study session to kind of bring them up to speed, talk to them, get their feedback, which would result in we're looking at November for a public hearing from the planning commission, and we'll be asking for their recommendation, which they make to our mayor and council, and then ultimately have this in front of mayor and council by the end of the year for their review. So we do want to get a little bit of feedback. We have done a pretty thorough review of the feedback that we've received from a lot of our policy documents, the feedback that went into those, as well as like our urban overlay districts. We looked at the feedback we received from the Sunshine Mile, the feedback we received from the Grant Road overlay, from the infill incentive district. And that has kind of helped us to at least get an understanding of where to start. But we do want additional feedback, and we're just kind of, we have a couple things that we want to get some comments on, or votes on, I guess. So we have a Mentimeter. I'm hoping, I know some of you have probably used this. If not, you can do one of two things. You can use with your phone. You can go to the QR code that's here and go to that link, and that'll bring you to the Mentimeter. You can go to www.menti.com and enter that code. Additionally, I believe Ina was going to put a link in the chat. You can even click on the link in the chat, and then we'll go through for I think 4 different slides, and I'm going to ask you to prioritize your top 5 for each for those. So we'll go to the first one. That should pop up. We found out in our in-person meeting that if I change the slide while you're doing it, it cuts you off. So I'm going to be very careful not to. And I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to fill out and prioritize your top 5. So this first one that we're looking at here is really what Tucson needs and what you'd like to see.
How does it work?
It doesn't seem to be updating in the presentation, Dan, but I have it open and it's updating on my screen.
Oh no.
I can share it while you want me to do that?
Yeah, do you mind? That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Get this. Oh.
I do want to mention that we will keep this open as well for, I believe, 14 days. So if you want to come back and fill this out as well, you're more than welcome to. It'll be open for you. Um,
Let me know when you want me to go to the next one.
yeah, I think let's go to the next one. I'll start moving once we moved it. Okay, second one. This is just related to concerns. So we went through again with that review of previous policy documents and feedback. And these were some of the concerns that came out of those when we talked about infill development, redevelopment, and that type of thing. So, you know, again, top 5 as far as just kind of concerns that you may have. And if we missed any, you know, feel free to put those in the chat, and we may have already. And then, but we also have, we do have a comment form as well, that's on our website. You can also elaborate more in the comment form that we have on our website. All right. Okay. We got some good answers. So top 4 on this one: inability to walk and bike to neighborhood amenities, lack of affordable housing, lack of connectivity to new development, and increased urban heat element. Oh, Ray, I see you have your hand up. Okay. Ina, do you want to maybe go to the next one? This is basically just showing you the goals that we have for this project, and wanted you to kind of prioritize those. So again, looking at the goals that that has been set up by Mayor and Council for this project and what we've been kind of presenting to you here. Hi, Alice. I'm sorry you haven't been able to participate. Definitely want to get your comments on this. Vicky, you as well. Feel free to either reach out to myself or fill out, you know, we do have the comment form online as well. And we'll be sending out an email with both the presentation and links to all that stuff. Okay, great. With the goals, top 1, make infill development, especially affordable housing, simpler to build along the corridor, and affordable housing barriers, along with redevelopment of underutilized and vacant sites. All right, and then we'll go to the last one. Thanks, Ina. And this one here is just kind of talking about those strategies. that we talked about as well, and kind of what, what you feel is important for the city, and what could be beneficial for a strategy to help to encourage redevelopment on these corridors. Kind of like watching a horse race. This is very interesting.
Like zoning Olympics.
Parking was out there in the lead for a while, but I think they may have lost some steam. Great. Well, really appreciate the feedback. Like I said, it's going to be open for another 14 days or so. We'll have it on our website. So feel free to log in and fill out your preferences on those. I think I'm going to share my screen one more time. Put that back from you, Ina. Oops. And with that, we'll open it up to some questions from the group. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to try to keep things in order as best as I can. Start with Marianne. Questions or comments?
Thank you. So this was really good, and it looks like a lot of work went into it, and I hope you're excited. I mean, when you're doing something like this, it should get your creative juices flowing, and it looks like it did. So kudos for the work on this. A couple of things. With regards to the proposed zoning tools, my thought is that the smaller parcel development should be one of those tools that's singled out, because there's a lot of smaller parcels in Tucson that can be developed, and with smaller apartment complexes, or tiny homes or whatever. So that's just a thought. And with regards to open space, I think that bus stops can help with that shading. So if we require, transportation, I forgot the name of our buses, but anyway, to put in, bus stops that offer real shade, rather than artwork, or both anyway, that will help in that outdoor space shading feel. And I have to say, if you look at MLK, there's a lot of parking spaces that aren't used there. One of our projects, Alvord Court Apartments, we could have a third building on it. And we're always full with a wait list. So you know, the sins of our fathers with what's happened with, you know, parking. It needs to change drastically. And one of the things in the study that wasn't considered or that I didn't see here is we're forgetting about the really poor people, you know, whose incomes are $15,000 a year, and the elderly who are living on fixed incomes. So when we're talking about the cost of housing, that's a population that we work with, but I think we also need to consider in how you're looking at reducing costs. And you know, the cost of construction has gone up, cost of insurance has gone up, and the only way to build to, you know, that insurance has like doubled or tripled in some cases for multifamily. And in order to address this, we have to be really looking at building. So the insurance costs affect our operating ability. Unless we have cement, we're using a lot of cement, we're using a lot of steel, we're creating fire barriers and flood barriers in our building, that operating cost is going to affect the property. So just something to talk about. And then the other issue is, you know, the change in building codes. And some of the requirements, like having to require electric vehicle services and things like that. We have to be looking at building codes and zoning. But other than that, I think this is fabulous, and I really appreciate, you know, the work that went into it. So thank you very much, and I'll, you know, continue to send in comments.
All right, thank you, Marianne. I appreciate it. I did want to just note, yeah, when we talk about, I mean, we're trying to help with housing affordability, not and support incentives for like capital A affordable housing. But yes, there's a whole nother set of tools, and this is only the, you know, one thing in a whole toolbox that will be needed to address really our overall housing affordability and especially affordable housing. So thank you, Marianne. Vicki, your hand is up.
Okay, I've worked on the Grant Alvernon area plan, and early in the process, Alyssa and Corinne stressed that we go out into the community and talk to people about what the plans are and what they think of it and everything. And I was wondering, are you actually having physical in-person meetings about this corridor plan with folks along Houghton, Valencia, all of the housing south of I-10? Are you having like real personal contact with the people that will be affected by this?
So we had an in-person meeting on Tuesday. This is really the first amount of outreach that we've done with this. I will say that a lot of what we did over the last year or so was going back and looking at the feedback that we've received from similar projects and from our kind of public outreach that we've done for our plans and policies that we've done. So trying to learn from a lot of, you know, all of that to get an understanding of really, you know, what exactly kind of the community needs and wants related to that. So
well, do you talk to the community? Do you talk to the neighborhoods? Everything is done on a survey now, and people are getting survey burnout. And I wonder how many people on this particular call actually live near a corridor and will be impacted. And are people talking about my neighborhood when they live in Vale? That kind of thing. And I really would like to have you get out into the community and talk to people about this. And the final thing is, if this is a regional issue, why aren't we talking to Sahuarita? That's obscene what's going on out there. Why don't they put in corridor studies? Why don't they and Marana all get together? We should not have to solve their problems on our backs. So anyway, I'm just concerned about public input from people who will be affected. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate it. Ben, you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi Dan. This work will be nothing short of transformational for the city. I think it's fantastic. It's great, and I really, as a resident of the Broadmoor Broadway Village neighborhood, and a person that does live very near to a major corridor, I fully support that work, and just wanted to say thanks to staff for putting in the time and the thoughtfulness to get us to this place. I think that this is a lot, has been a long time coming, and it's going to just be absolutely fantastic for the city. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Nicole, you have your hand up? Oh, you're muted still. Oh, there you go.
Great. Thanks. Hi. First of all, I was really pleasantly surprised to hear some of the proposals made. I love to see the interdepartmental collaboration as well within the city. I didn't hear mention of the consideration of perhaps a land value tax. I could have missed it. But something that, our property tax system is county, but I believe that the city separately could impose a land value tax to encourage some of the private owners of the downtown lots that are currently used as surface parking or empty to sell for development. I realized this was specifically about corridors. I would love to hear we all know that our arterial streets are extremely dangerous. If you look at the heat map of crashes and fatalities, they're pretty much all along our arterials. So if we're talking about developing along on our arterials, you have to discuss that. Tucson is the third deadliest city for pedestrians in the United States, the second deadliest city for cyclists in the United States. You really have, if we're planning on adding more housing along those arterials, personally, I think the arterials, transportation, maybe they're in a bind here. Maybe council needs to direct them to take those arterials and make them either high-speed roads connecting faraway places or local streets with 20-mile-an-hour speed limits where people can walk. I would also consider, I think a lot of your goals nailed it. Don't leave neighborhoods completely out of this conversation. Something to propose would be allowing the next higher number of units per parcel by right. So if you have 1 unit, you can go to 2. If you have 2 units, you can go to 3. That would be a very low risk. It's not going to cause dramatic change, but it's something on top of the ADU policies that would solve a lot of the same problems you're discussing today. And yeah, good job. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate it. I do want to just note related to financial incentives and things of that sort. And we are working with economic initiatives. We're working with Rio Nuevo and some of the other groups to look at what also, we know that zoning is just one piece of the pie, one tool that we have. How do we address some of those other barriers that are there as well? So, but thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Ben, have your hand up.
So I agree with what others are saying, that I really do like the changes here. I support a lot of the proposals. Going on with I don't know if this is much of a question, is more of just I guess a suggestion, which I can also add to the form. But if parking minimums don't get removed or reduced, at least, or if they do get reduced, whatever it may be, but if parking minimums still exist, possibly even adjusting the individual parking plan as well, and amending that, because I know some people in the city and out of the city that I've talked to about it, and they said it is kind of, it only applies to a few different kinds of developments, and if that could be expanded to, I don't know the exact types of developments, but if it could be expanded to other kinds, and I'm not sure fully what the process is, but from what I've heard from other people, it can be a bit bureaucratic. Again, I'm not sure exactly what the steps are, but it might be worth looking into.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, no, appreciate the comments related to the individual parking plan. Great. Any other comments? Vicky, you have your hand up. Are you have any other comments? Oh, John, you have your hand up.
Good afternoon. Really want to compliment the presentation, the research that was done, as I was holding back any comments, texting to really listen to everything before I would make any comments, because it's easy to have an opinion before I hear everything. But certainly what I heard was a well thought out concept of where to start, the corridor concept. And people are always concerned about their neighborhoods. I understand that. I live in a neighborhood, certainly concerned about my neighborhood and other neighborhoods of quality. Corridors are certainly the appropriate approach, it sounds to me like, for where the development should go, encouraging the density there. And the transit issues could be transformed dramatically with this kind of planning. So I give you guys a lot of credit for reaching out beyond our community. We love our community. Been in this community my whole life, and I think we can do some amazing things with what you're planning, and bring some affordability to housing and quality where people can be, living in an urban lifestyle in the city all along these corridors and get to know each other, experience the opportunities to walk. And I think some of the safety concerns about walking are very relevant, and how those can be planned into these kinds of projects. So I'm very excited about the concepts. I think there's a lot of value to this, and I'm sure the toughest questions will come from those who live near the corridors or up against them, and that's always going to be difficult. But reality is, they're not buffer zones. I'd have to say that they probably were never planned to be buffer zones as a property along the corridors that could be developed. So I think it's important that they're developed appropriately. And this seems to be the appropriate use. It's a good answer, and I encourage us to continue with dialogue and come up with continued suggestions, quality suggestions. So appreciate all your efforts for staff and the city council and mayor for directing this. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Yeah, Peter and then Megan. I know we're getting close on time. Myself and a couple of others will stick around and answer some additional questions as well, if you'd like.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Just to begin by echoing what John was just saying, you guys did a really great job. Couple of thoughts here. One is that some of the drivers of, I was just reading an article within the last couple of days, folks looking at housing shortage and how some of that, and this is kind of national, but I assume it's relevant to Tucson. There's a far larger effect than some of us realize, having to do with supply chain of the construction materials, and I'm just raising that not as a distraction of the conversation, but to say, hey, there may be some of these, call them externalities or whatever, that it may be worth looking at, because some of those may be more temporary and some of them may be more long-term, and it's hard to tell the difference sometimes. And that kind of goes, I think, to one of the points, and I think Lisa acknowledged this in one of the chat things, that some of the goals and concerns and whatnot that you laid out are mixing concerns about current conditions with concerns, for example, about future growth or future development. And if there's a way to distinguish some of that, I think that would help the thinking and the discussion regarding planning. Let me just stop with that so other folks have time. But thank you guys, really appreciate your work.
Thank you, Peter, appreciate it. And then Megan.
Thank you. I really just wanted to echo the appreciation for the process you all have gone through. It is, we know it's a really complicated problem, and that there's a lot of factors to be considered. And so I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and would just really encourage that we move forward with these changes, and that while we do need a lot of community input in this process, this session being one of those opportunities, we also have to be cautious that we don't let things be perfect and restrict us from making progress. And so I just really want to say, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. And these are really positive changes for the community. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Appreciate it. Okay, real quickly, if you have any additional questions, definitely welcome to stay afterwards and follow up, or even follow up with Ina or Carver or myself related to this. We're going to follow up with the slides, have those posted online, post the video online of this, as well as the comments. So thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate all of the feedback. It helps us as we move. It's going to help us as we move forward, and we will hopefully see you soon. Thank you so much.
Hey, Dan, can I follow up on something that I kind of set aside? It just builds on a comment I put into the chat. I think some of the material in the presentation is really compelling, like the stepped up design and some of that you had later. Man, I would lead with some of that because when you hear some of the initial ideas, those aren't, it's not clear how those might play out.
Yeah.
And I think when I saw the stepped up design and some of the overhangs and those kinds of things, they resonated immediately. Some of those other comments, I wasn't sure where they might be located. So I had this feeling that, they could be anywhere and everywhere. But I think you're talking about something very different, something much more thoughtful, and wrestling with how zoning and codes could help make that happen. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to applaud some of that thinking and suggest maybe like one of those ideas about, lead with the headline kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
bottom
really
line
nice
up
job.
front, right?
Yeah, exactly. But really appreciate the discussion and the chat was as important, I think, as the presentation. So good on you guys for doing it all.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, there's no other comments or questions. Again, really appreciate it. We will be in touch with follow-up information. Thanks, everyone.